Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. The European Parliament's Committee on Foreign Interference is holding a hearing on India's massive disinformation campaign against Pakistan. EU Disinfo Lab officials briefed the committee on the Indian network of fake websites and think tanks working to malign Pakistan. One person has died after Indian farmers' protest against agricultural reforms on the country's Republic Day turned violent. Thousands of farmers on tractors breached the police barricades to enter the Red Fort in the capital and hoisted flags of Khalistan. Police used batons and fired tear gas to disperse the protesters. Iran and Russia have signed an agreement to strengthen cooperation on cybersecurity. The pact was signed by Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov at a meeting in Moscow. The two sides also urged the U.S. to lift sanctions against Tehran and rejoin the 2015 nuclear deal. Italy's Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has resigned after his coalition allies withdrew their support over his handling of coronavirus. Now President Sergio Mattarella will decide whether to form a new coalition or call an election after talks with parties in the coming days. The number of deaths by COVID-19 in the United States has crossed 420,000 with over 25.2 million cases. Meanwhile, the new Brazilian variant of the virus has also been found in the U.S. Mexico's COVID-19 death toll has topped 150,000 following a recent surge, while its infections tally has jumped to 1.7 million. Pakistan has registered over 1,800 new cases and 58 deaths overnight, raising the toll to 11,376. The global number of infections is set to cross the 100 million mark with more than 2.1 million fatalities. Pakistan trails South Africa by 187 runs at stumps on day one of the first test match in Karachi. The hosts scored 33 runs for the loss of 4 wickets. Earlier, South Africa were bowled out for 220 in their first innings. Dean Algar top scored for the visitors with 58 runs, while Pakistan's Yasir Shah picked up 3 wickets. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now for the news in more detail. We begin with the European Parliament. The European Parliament's Committee on Foreign Interference is holding a hearing on India's massive disinformation campaign against Pakistan. EU Disinfo Lab officials briefed the committee on the Indian network of fake websites and think tanks working to malign Pakistan. The global network was exposed by the EU Disinfo Lab last year. Pakistan has repeatedly urged the international community to hold India accountable for its malicious propaganda against Pakistan. Moving on, the Indian farmers marked the country's Republic Day as a protest day against government's controversial agricultural laws. Thousands of farmers entered the Red Fort in the capital city of New Delhi and hoisted flags of Khalistan.
Police used batons and fired tear gas on the protesting farmers as chaos prevailed at New Delhi's Singhu border. But farmers broke police barricades to force their way into the capital. Thousands of farmers are holding a tractor march to oppose the agriculture reforms. Indian police had told the farmers to hold their rally after the Republic Day parade, but the protesters did not agree. Heavy security has been deployed in view of the unprecedented protest. The unions have also announced a foot march to Parliament on February 1st, the day the annual budget is scheduled to be presented. A consortium of 41 farmer unions in India has been protesting for 2 months against laws they say expose them to corporate exploitation. Over 80 farmers have so far died from illnesses, while 4 have committed suicide during the sit-ins.
Now, for more on this, we are being joined by Manpreet Singh, and he is the General Secretary of the World Sikh Parliament. Manpreet, thank you so much for your time. Manpreet, today's farmers' protest completely overshadowed India's Republic Day. In your view, what does this depict about today's India? Is India becoming increasingly divided?
This is a reflex action, as I would see this. Modi regime is being very is behaving like a tyrant, basically. It's his way or no way. And due to these 3 draconian laws that have been imposed on the farmers, they've been peacefully and calmly protesting for months now. And Modi regime is still not paying any attention whatsoever. So I think this was a reflex action. I've just been interviewed on a different channel, and this is what I said on that channel as well, that there were 2 parades today. One parade was the people who believe in this India where things are getting imposed on the minorities, where human rights violations are happening. And there was another parade, which was the farmers who were just protesting for their rights, for the very rights that Indian government owe it to them. First of all, our Punjabis and Sikhism, especially in particular, we have been subject to genocide for a very long period. And now there's another era of econocide which has commenced in India. So obviously the farmers were there for it's just a reflex action. They were denied the routes they wanted to go and do their tractor rally. They are denied any serious talks about taking these laws back. They are denied their basic rights. So obviously there will be a reflex action, and this is what it was today.
Manpreet, we saw Khalistan flags during the protest today, and we even saw one waving on the Red Fort, over the Red Fort rather. What is the significance of that? And do you see the farmers' movement gaining more momentum and perhaps morphing into a secessionist movement?
The farmers, there's about 70-80% of the Punjab population which is dependent on farming. And if you take away from them what's right, they're gonna obviously react to it. As far as the Khalistan flags are concerned, Khalistan has been at the epicenter of the Sikh community demand since 1984. It's not something that we started. It's the Indian government who committed a full-fledged genocide of Sikhs, on our main, which is like Mecca for us, which is our Akal Takht Sahib and Darbar Sahib. It was attacked. A full-fledged army operation was launched. So obviously these things are going to have repercussions. If you deny people their basic rights, then they will move towards full and complete self-determination and obviously eventually getting independence. Modi regime has been following the RSS propaganda of one nation, one language, one religion, and so on, Kashmir abrogation of Article 370 is a result of it. These farmer laws being imposed so harshly on the farmers is the result of it. Modi is adamant, and he's on this mad race of rampage and, trying to enforce his will on the people and the people's faith. So I think these 2 things, though be different, are now getting closer and closer and getting combined, and we are getting public support out of it.
Right. Now, this is one of the longest farmers-led movement India has ever seen. After over 2 months, why do you think the Modi government is still failing to end the deadlock?
The Modi government, as I said, they've basically passed so many of these draconian laws. If they have to start with it, the first was the 370 abrogation, then it was Citizenship Amendment Act, Then there was a UAPA Act, which is Unlawful Activity Prevention Act, which was very similar to TARDA and POTA. And now these three laws for farmers. If they take anything back, the questions will be raised and there will be demand to take the other acts back as well. And this goes against their whole propaganda, which they're trying to enforce when trying to, enforce onto this country. So obviously they are adamant that they're not going to, go back from their original stand. But this is going to cost them something real big this time. And obviously I want to highlight through your channel to the audience, I don't want to be pessimistic, but I do want to admit that we are scared. This could be a ground preparation for another big genocide in India, which we are very concerned as well as Parliament.
Manpreet, so just to clarify, you don't see the Indian government backing down, is that correct?
I don't see, to be honest, the way it's looking right now, I don't think so. They are just trying to find excuses and, relate this peaceful protest to other sort of activities. And they're just trying, it's just they are in the habit of converting everything that goes against them into terrorism. So this is why I'm worried about. Rather than they committing to their mistake and correcting it or redeeming it, they will do something else, which they will just blame onto the people back on. So I am really concerned. I don't think so. India, for a very long time, has been in the habit of ignoring the minorities, ignoring the interests of the poor and the common man. And I think they will continue to do the same until and unless they get some sort of, they get some brain feed from somewhere that this is actually going against themselves. The war they have started is going to finish with finishing them.
Manpreet Singh, thank you so much for talking to Indus News. And now moving on, Kashmiris on both sides of the line of control and the world over are observing the Indian Republic Day as Black Day.
To draw world attention to unlawful Indian occupation, protest rallies and demonstrations are being held in Azad Jammu and Kashmir. The demonstrations will highlight the tyrannical occupation and gross human rights violations by New Delhi's occupying forces. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says India is denying the constitutional rights of the Kashmiris. Slamming the extremist RSS Hindutva ideology ruling India today, Qureshi said all minorities, including Muslims, Bengalis, Dalits, are being targeted. India illegally annexed occupied Kashmir on August 5, 2019 and imposed a crushing curfew in the valley ever since. The region has been turned into an open prison of over 13 million people, with livelihoods, education and healthcare paralyzed. Hundreds of unarmed innocent Kashmiri civilians have been martyred, while the curfew has created a serious humanitarian crisis as well. Meanwhile, the All Parties Hurriyat Conference is holding a rally outside the Indian High Commission in Islamabad to mark the day. The APHC leaders say the protest aims to apprise the world of the gross rights violations and custodial killings of the Muslims in the occupied Kashmir.
Now, Pakistan has firmly opposed the creation of new permanent seats in the United Nations Security Council. However, Islamabad has supported increasing the non-permanent seats of the key UN body. Addressing the first meeting of the Intergovernmental Negotiations Framework during the 75th session of the United Nations, Pakistan's envoy Munir Akram said the creation of new seats will make the Council less effective and more divided. He said the new seats will erode the principle of sovereign equality of states, but he said the proposal to have 21 non-permanent seats can redress the deficit of equitable representation. Akram also reiterated Islamabad's position for comprehensive reforms of the Council, which meets the interests of all member states. Moving on, in Afghanistan, one person has been killed and another wounded in an improvised explosive device blast in the capital city of Kabul. In a statement, Kabul police said an investigation into the incident is underway. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack yet. Meanwhile, a deputy head of the Kunduz Provincial Council and his driver were wounded in a blast in Kunduz city. The head of the provincial council said the incident happened as they left home for the office. This comes a day after an armored vehicle of the Italian embassy was hit by an IED blast in Kabul. Now, a Taliban delegation has arrived in Iran to discuss Afghanistan's political and security situation. In a tweet, Taliban spokesperson Mohammad Naeem said the delegation is visiting on Iran's invitation. He said Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar is leading the delegation. Naeem added the Taliban will discuss Afghanistan's political and security situation and bilateral ties with Tehran. The spokesperson said discussion over the Afghan refugees in Iran will also be on the agenda. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson said the Afghan peace process will also be discussed. In a statement, Saeed Khatibzadeh said Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif will also hold a meeting with the visiting group. And in Yemen's central province of Marib, Houthi rebels say the Saudi-led coalition warplanes launched 18 airstrikes targeting its fighters. The Houthi state media said the airstrikes targeted several positions in Sirwa district. The airstrikes followed an attempted missile attack by Houthi rebels on Riyadh on Saturday. The Saudi-led coalition said it shot down an apparent missile aimed at civilians in the capital. Meanwhile, Qatar and Pakistan have strongly condemned the attack on Saudi Arabia, saying such attempts violate international law. The U.S. has approved all transactions involving Yemen's Houthi movement for the next month. The U.S. Treasury Department said foreign banks will not be exposed to sanctions if they conduct or facilitate a transaction. Former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo designated the Houthi as a terrorist organization a day before President Joe Biden took office. The measure banned Americans from doing business with the group and made it a crime to provide support or resources to the group. However, the Biden administration is currently reviewing the designation amid criticism from rights agencies. Yesterday, 22 aid organizations said in a joint statement that the designation will worsen Yemen's humanitarian crisis. Moving on, Iran and Russia have signed an agreement to strengthen cooperation on cybersecurity. The pact was signed by Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov at a meeting in Moscow. Under the pact, the two countries will jointly fight the crimes committed with the use of information and communications technology. The two foreign ministers also urged the U.S. to lift sanctions against Tehran and rejoin the 2015 nuclear deal. This was the first meeting between Russian and Iranian foreign ministers since the change of power in the United States. Zarif will also visit Armenia, Georgia, and Turkey in the coming days. Now, the Russian government has ruled out any dialogue with people protesting against the arrest of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. In a statement, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the levels of violence from some protesters were unprecedented. Peskov said the demonstrators committed serious offenses by participating in the riots and attacking law enforcement officials. He said the incidences of police violence against protesters were far fewer and are being investigated. The remarks came after tens of thousands took to the streets over the weekend to demand his release. Meanwhile, a Russian court will hear Navalny's appeal against his arrest on Thursday ahead of a new opposition protest planned this weekend. Navalny was remanded in custody for 30 days last week for alleged parole violations. And we'll be back with more news in detail after a short break. Stick around. We're back. Italy's Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has resigned after his coalition allies withdrew their support over his handling of coronavirus. More than 85,000 people have died so far due to the virus in Italy. The 56-year-old leader handed in his resignation at the presidential palace in Rome following a cabinet meeting this morning. He has headed two coalition governments since 2018. Now he is hoping to gain President Sergio Mattarella's backing to form a new cabinet. The president will decide whether to form a new coalition or call an election after talks with parties in the coming days. The number of deaths from COVID-19 in the United States has crossed 420,000 with over 25.2 million cases. Meanwhile, the new Brazilian variant of the virus has also been found in the United States. The global number of infections is set to cross the 100 million mark with more than 2.1 million fatalities. More about the pandemic in the following report.
Controversies over the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, protests over the lockdown, and the transnational political rows over the vaccine distribution are the new trends in the fight against the pandemic. In the Americas, Mexico's COVID-19 death toll has topped 150,000 following a recent surge, while its infections tally has jumped to 1.7 million. Brazil's Supreme Court has approved an investigation into the government's handling of the COVID-19 in the Amazonian city of Manaus. Hospitals in Chile are struggling to cope as infections spike across the South American country. The worst-hit U.S. state of California lifted its stay-at-home orders, moving the counties back into their tier-based reopening framework. Meanwhile, United States President Joe Biden says he may raise his goal of 100 million vaccines in 100 days to 150 million doses.
I promised that we would get at least 100 million vaccinations. That's not people, because sometimes you need more than one shot, the vaccination, but 100 million shots in people's arms of the vaccine. I think with the grace of God and the goodwill of the neighbor and the creek not rising, as the old saying goes, I think we may be able to get that to 1.5 million a day, rather than 1 million a day. But we have to meet that goal of 1 million a day.
In Europe, as infections spiked to record high in Spain, the capital, Madrid, has imposed a new curfew in the city. Police arrested at least 70 people in the Netherlands as anti-lockdown protests turned riots entered the third night. The European Union has threatened to impose tight controls on the export of vaccines made in the bloc, impacting the United Kingdom's supply of Pfizer jabs. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom says it is in close contact with suppliers after the EU issued the warning amid a row with the AstraZeneca over shortfall of the doses for member states. The World Health Organization says the report of $9.2 trillion loss to the global economy over vaccine nationalism will be a moral and economic failure.
The second study, commissioned by the International Chamber of Commerce Research Foundation, makes a strong economic case for vaccine equity. It finds that vaccine nationalism could cost the global economy up to $9.2 trillion US, and almost half of that, $4.5 trillion, would be incurred in the wealthiest economies.
Over in Asia, India continues to struggle with one roadblock after another in its vaccine drive as technical glitches and operational failures mar the campaign. In China, 82 new cases have been detected in the mainland, with 69 locally transmitted infections.
Whereas in Pakistan, another 58 people have died from COVID-19 overnight, raising the toll to 11,376. The health ministry says 1,873 new infections were detected over the past 24 hours. The number of cases has risen to nearly 536,000, while over 490,000 have recovered. Currently, there are more than 34,000 active cases across the country. The ministry said over 242,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province. Punjab has reported more than 154,000 cases. In the capital city of Islamabad, over 40,000 have been infected so far. Now, Uganda's opposition leader Bobi Wine has denounced torture and humiliation after security forces lifted a blockade from his home. Wine was placed under house arrest after a disputed January 14th vote, which he lost to long-serving President Yoweri Museveni. Security forces left Wine's house in compliance with a court order. Wine said he and his family were harassed by police and security officials. The pop star turned politician said his struggle for freedom will continue.
I was born free, and I'm free, only that I'm everywhere in chains. As you saw, while the court ordered the police to vacate our premises, we still have police and military helicopters hovering over us. That does not stop us. We are not going to let them to identify us as unfree. We are free, and anything that is trying to take away our freedom will be resisted.
Moving on, the Central African Republic says its military has killed 44 rebel fighters. In a Facebook post, the government said the military and allied forces launched joint offensive in Boyali village. The statement read, the militants were attempting to besiege Bangui and overturn the newly re-elected president. It said the killed militants also include several mercenaries from Chad, Sudan, as well as the members of the ethnic Fulani group. Meanwhile, a government spokesperson said the Bangui forces have restarted the offensive against the rebels. He said the troops have recaptured a village from the rebels near the capital with the support from Russian fighters. Earlier, the rebels tried to blockade Bangui a week before the recently held presidential election. Moving on, Greece has signed a $3 billion deal with France for the purchase of 18 Dassault-Made Rafael fighter jets. Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis said the recent military purchases are not a threat to any other country. After signing the deal, Greek Defense Minister said the latest addition will significantly strengthen the Air Force. He said the acquisition of the jets is a milestone in defense cooperation and relations between Greece and France. Meanwhile, French Defense Minister Florence Parly expressed hope that the Greek Navy will also acquire French ships. The first 6 new aircrafts are scheduled to arrive at Greece's Tanagra Air Force Base in July. In Australia, thousands of people have gathered in Sydney to protest against the mistreatment of Indigenous people. Police arrested 1 person during the protest and 4 others after a skirmish with security officials later. In a last-minute compromise with police, thousands were allowed to gather in socially distanced groups in Sydney, although the annual march was called off. January 26th marks the date the British fleet sailed into Sydney Harbour in 1788 to start a penal colony. But many Indigenous Australians who trace their lineage back 50,000 years call it Invasion Day.
This country is, was and always will be Aboriginal land. White Australia is, was and always will be a penal colony. Nothing changes it. And the blackfellas are the only people that can create change for the better.
Paleontologists in Argentina have unearthed the fossilized remains of a dinosaur. It could be the largest dinosaur to ever roam the planet some 98 million years ago.
First discovered in 2012, experts did not realize the significance of the fossils until they started piecing together the 24 vertebrae and pieces of fossilized bone found in thick mud in the Candelores Formation in New Quan province. But in a new study, paleontologists say the remains belong to a huge plant-eating dinosaur called a Titanosaur. They are potentially the largest ever unearthed. Titanosaurs were part of a highly successful group of dinosaurs called sauropods, known for their long necks, long tails, and pillar-like legs. The largest, such as Argentinosaurus and Patagotitan, were around 120 feet long. Paleontologists have said the skeleton of Titanosaur discovered in New Quan is far from complete.
And Russia's HoverSurf company has presented a newly developed model of a flying taxi. The company said the flying vehicle is expected to enter mass production by the end of the year. More about the flying taxi in this report.
Flying cars have been around for a long time in our dreams. But now a Russian company, HoverSurf, has presented the new model of a flying taxi. It said the aircraft will be tested with the use of 5G network in September this year. The same model has already successfully passed a number of tests in Russia and the UAE. The company said it is working to ensure the possibility of flights in Moscow during 2023 to 2025.
The flying machine, the prototype, will soon turn into a serial device that we are going to build in 2021. And thus, all the technologies that we have already built will be applied to this machine. And the car will fly with a new type of engine that is installed here.
In 2017, Hoversurf made a deal with the Dubai police, giving it its first production copy of the Hoverbike S3, a single-seat personal drone. CEO Alexander Atmanov described the Hoverbike as an extreme model, but said they have been working on improving the aircraft.
We started with the technology of a single-seat personal drone hoverbike, Scorpion S3. It was extreme. He was noisier, more extreme, bolder, if I may say so. Since then, we have been constantly modernizing the technology of transporting a person by air using a drone, constantly striving for some new goals, and all these technologies are moving from one type of aircraft to another, constantly improving and becoming safer.
The estimated price for a flight by air taxi in the future will be $0.27 per kilometer. Since 2016, the company has attracted $3 million in investments for its flying passenger drone.
Now, Paris Haute Couture Week, one of the high points of the fashion calendar, is being held without crowds this year. Brands have replaced the runway with online projections, with Christian Dior churning out some tarot magic. More in this report.
Lavish golden dresses decked out in zodiac signs and tarot symbols provided some Christian Dior-infused mysticism for the start of the Paris Couture Week. In a whimsical film set in a fairy-style castle with tarot card characters like the High Priestess or Justice, Dior designer Maria Grazia Chiuri provided glitter and gold with gowns that combined lame fabric with velvet. Tarot cards are a recurring motif and reference at Dior, including under the brand's superstitious late founder, with many looks evoking a 15th century illuminated tarot deck known as the Visconti Sforza.
The real thing is that can help not to be afraid about something that you don't know, about the future that is so uncertain, so insecure. I think that we are not too worried to change our life.
Luxury brands have had to transform the way they plan for collection with coronavirus restrictions, and Chiuri said Dior now carried out fittings with haute couture clients over Zoom calls, orchestrating adjustments from afar.
But after I realized that we have to try to make the best for all the supply chain that there is behind clothes, because we are not to forget that we have to maintain this tradition, our atelier, but also the embroidery in Paris that work for the couture.
Top brands like Chanel and Valentino are also due to present their haute couture ranges online.
We'll be back with more stories after a short break. Stay with us. We're back with the latest in business. The International Monetary Fund has raised its forecast about the global economic growth as coronavirus vaccines are being administered across the world. According to its latest World Economic Outlook, it now expects the economy to grow 5.5% this year. This is 0.3% up from the earlier forecast. The organization, however, warns of the risk new COVID variants pose to the post-pandemic recovery. Moving on, the Wall Street stocks have climbed as the markets geared up for the corporate earnings season. Investors are also waiting for results from major tech companies and a new policy statement from the Federal Reserve. The shares of General Electric soared by 9%, while Johnson & Johnson also jumped over 3% higher. All the major bourses landed in positive territories. Meanwhile, oil prices fell over fading hopes for a rapid approval of new U.S. economic stimulus and mounting new COVID-19 cases. And moving on to sports, starting off with cricket, Pakistan trails South Africa by 187 runs in the first innings of the first test at Karachi's National Stadium. The hosts were 33 for 4 at the stumps on day one after bowling out South Africa for 220 runs. Yasir Shah was pick of the bowlers for his 3 wickets for 54, while debutant Noman Ali sent 2 batsmen back to pavilion. Dean Algar top scored for the visitors with 58 runs. In reply, Kagiso Rabada sent both Pakistani openers back to pavilion on just 15 runs. Azhar Ali and Fawad Alam will resume the innings when Pakistan comes to bat tomorrow. The two sides will play 3 T20 internationals after the 2-match test series. For more on this, we're being joined by cricket analyst Adnan Qureshi. Adnan, thank you so much for joining us. Adnan, having bowled the visitors out for 220, Pakistan lost early wickets before stumps on day one. What do you say about the overall performance of both the teams today?
Well, it's one of those days that, Pakistan were very happy at the lunch break, and then now they're probably fearing coming back to bat the next day because it's such a poor performance by the top order batsmen, and this is becoming a trend for Pakistan cricket. I mean, I just see the hangover from the New Zealand tour still on this, and they're still not confident, seeing some really bad decisions while they were batting today. They still can't play the short ball, as you could see, and I mean, in the fast bowling, even though this is not really a fast bowler's wicket, Pakistan was not able to play the South African quicks at all. And it seems like a dismal situation. I mean, especially after bowling them out for 220, they should have really taken the initiative, and they've not. So it's going to be tough pickings for Pakistan from here.
Adnan, what strategy do you think Pakistan's batting lineup could or should adopt if the pitch continues to be in favor of the bowlers?
Well, they need to be patient first and foremost. I mean, they look to be in a hurry. This is not a T20 match. It's a test match. For some reason, I don't know why all of these batsmen have this T20 hangover, and they just seem to want to play their shots very early. They play at wide balls. They play at balls that you're supposed to leave in Test cricket. I mean, that's how, if you saw the Indian tour in Australia, the batsmen, the way they were playing, the Pakistani batsmen need to take some lessons from them perhaps, and try to leave some of these balls that you're supposed to play at. And they need to be patient and stay at the wicket. That's the key, and it doesn't seem like it's happening. And if they carry on like this, I don't even see them getting to 100 runs tomorrow. It's a really poor situation.
Well, let's hope not. Adnan Qureshi, thank you so much for talking to Indus News. Moving on, Afghanistan have beaten Ireland by 36 runs in the 3rd ODI to complete their first ever series in a whitewash. Rashid Khan was declared the man of the match, while Paul Sterling won the Player of the Series award. Afghanistan set a 267-run target after batting first. Rashid Khan top scored with 48 runs, while skipper Asghar Afghan amassed 41 for Afghanistan. While Ireland struggled from the beginning, except for opener Sterling, who contributed 118 runs for the team. Rashid Khan was the pick of the bowlers for taking 4 wickets, helping Afghanistan clinch a nail-biter against Ireland. And now it's time to take a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.